Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be doing the popular opinions book tag. So there's a tag on BookTube that I think has been around for a while called the unpopular opinions book tag, which I've never done because honestly I feel like most of my bookish opinions are actually pretty popular. However, I recently saw that Abby has created the reverse of this tag called the popular opinions book tag, and I really liked the idea of it, so I thought I'd give it a go, and I will leave a link to Abby's video down below in case you wanted to check it out. But there are basically 9 questions that all relate to your popular opinions about books. So question number 1 is a popular book or series that you love. So I do feel like some of my answers are going to be quite similar to Abby's because we do have similar tastes, especially in fantasy books, but the series that I'm going to go for is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. I know that Sarah J Maas is a hugely popular author and I can understand why her books wouldn't be for everyone, but I personally absolutely loved this series, and I think that if you like fantasy and you like romance, then don't be put off by the hype. I feel like I put off reading this series for a really long time because I was convinced that it just wouldn't be as good as everyone was saying. But it was. I mean, the first book wasn't my personal favourite. I think I gave the first book 3 stars. However, the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, which I do have here, this is one of my favourite books of all time. And I feel like if you're going to read this series, then you have to go as far as the second book because it does go in a very different direction compared to the first book. I also want to mention the Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo because I feel like this series is already pretty popular, but I feel like it's about to become even more popular because of the Netflix show that's coming out soon. I know that the Shadow and Bone trilogy does get a few mixed reviews, and I can see why because it does have quite a few annoying YA tropes that you used to see a lot of around the time that this was published, and so I don't think it's aged as well in that sense. I still really enjoyed it. I think I gave the first book 4 stars, and then the second book 4 stars, and then the third book 3 stars, so I did still really enjoy it as a whole. However, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom are both incredible. I really love those books. I think that Leigh Bardugo's writing just gets better and better with every book that she publishes, and I love these characters. I can't wait to see what Netflix do with the adaptation. Question number 2 is an underhyped book or series that you love and wish was more popular. See, again with this question I feel like I could give the same answer that Abby gave, and that is The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. I absolutely loved this series when I was growing up. It was one of my favourite fantasy series when I was a teenager. I actually feel like it's very similar to Shadow and Bone, and actually when I read the Grishaverse I can remember thinking that it was very similar to this. This actually came out I think in 2001, whereas Shadow and Bone came out in 2012, so there was quite a gap between them. I would actually really love to read this series again at some point just to see if I do still love it as much now as I did when I was 15. Another series that I want to mention is The Dark Tower by Stephen King, and I know that Stephen King is definitely not an underhyped author, but I do feel like this series isn't given as much attention as his other books because he is more well known as a horror author, whereas this is kind of epic fantasy but with horror elements. This was actually turned into a film a few years ago, but it was awful. I think I watched the first half an hour and then I had to turn it off, or I fell asleep because it was just so boring. And to be fair, the first book in this series is also pretty boring, but it gets so much better, and I'm actually quite annoyed that they decided to turn it into a film instead of giving it the TV show that it deserves. This is another one of those series that I haven't read in a really long time, probably at least 10 years, and so I would really like to reread it at some point so I can say for definite that I do still like it, especially because I think the first book came out in the 70s or 80s, so quite a long time ago, and I know that sometimes with books that were published around that time they don't age particularly well, and so I would definitely like to reread this at some point. But there's 7 books in a series, and so I feel like I need to work myself up to it. I might next year or the year after do like 1 book a month and just work my way through it that way, but we'll see. Question number 3 is a romance that you love. So I could go for Akamath for this, but I feel like that would be a really obvious choice. So I have made a list of a couple of other romance books that I personally really loved. Red, White and Royal Blue was one of my favourite books of last year, 2020. Really loved the romance in this. I thought that Henry and Alex were so cute together and it was just adorable. I also wanted to mention the Brown Sister series, so Get a Life Chloe Brown and Take a Hint Danny Brown. Read both of these last year and absolutely loved them. I'm actually currently reading the 3rd book in the series, which is Act Your Age Eve Brown, and I feel like it might be my favourite of the 3, but I haven't finished it yet. I've still got, I think, about a quarter to go, but I just love these books. I think that Talia Hibbert does such a great job of writing romance and writing characters that you really want to get together. And I feel like that is the sign of a good romance. Like, the whole reason that I read romance is because I want to read about characters where I genuinely want them to end up together. Question number 4 is your favourite genre and a popular genre you want to read more of. I can't actually pick one favourite genre. I do read a lot of fantasy, or I've started reading a lot more fantasy recently, so maybe I would say that that's my favourite, but I feel like my most read genre is probably thrillers, like mystery thrillers. Basically anything that has some kind of mystery or a twist, regardless of the genre, I would say is my favourite. This is a really hard question to answer because I feel like I already read quite broadly in terms of genres. I read a lot of thrillers, I read a lot of fantasy, and I also read quite a lot of romance and literary fiction and contemporary fiction. I feel like the only genre that I do enjoy that I don't read enough of is maybe historical fiction. I don't know what it is, but I very rarely feel in the mood to read historical fiction. But when I actually do read it, I do enjoy it. And some of my favourite books are historical fiction books. So it is a genre that I should probably read more of. Question number 5 is a popular or beloved character that you love, or a character that you feel deserves more love. So I recently finished reading the David Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, which I absolutely loved. I gave all 3 books 5 stars, and I feel like it's a series that I do hear people talking about, like on BookTube and on Bookstagram, but I feel like the characters in that series are so well written, and Dara in particular is one of the most interesting characters that I've ever read about. And I don't want to say why, because I feel like that might be spoilery, but if you've read this series, then you might know what I'm talking about. I also wanted to mention The Diviners by Libba Bray, because I read the first book in this series, I think it was in November, and I haven't read the rest of the series yet, but I do want to. And I can definitely remember that one of the things that stood out to me about this first book was the characters. I felt like they were really well written, and I do think that the atmosphere of New York in the 1920s definitely helped with that. But I thought she put a lot of detail into the characters and their personalities, and I liked that they, for example, used real slang terms that, well, I'm assuming they were real slang terms, like slang terms and language that would have been used at that time, and it made them feel very real. I felt like I was reading about real people. Question number 6 is to name an autobuy author. I actually have a few, and I made a list by genre. So for fantasy, Sarah J Maas and Leigh Bardugo are definitely autobuy authors for me, as well as I think Laini Taylor, because I really enjoyed the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy and the Strange the Dreamer duology. So I feel like if she was to come out with another series, then I definitely want to read it. For thrillers, I've got Riley Sager, who writes a lot of psychological horror thrillers. Also Cara Hunter, her series, the D.I. Adam Fawley series, is amazing. Absolutely love it. And any new book in that series that comes out, I will want to read it straight away. Also Steve Kavanagh, who writes the Eddie Flynn series, which is lawyer, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a courtroom thriller series that's set in New York, and again, absolutely love it. All of those authors write really good twists in their books, and that is like my thing with thrillers, is that I need some good twists. I also wanted to mention Taylor Jenkins Reid, who wrote The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six. And Daisy Jones wasn't my favourite. I liked it, but Evelyn Hugo is one of my all-time favourite books, and I love the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid writes characters. I feel like that is her main strength in her books, is that she writes characters that feel very real. And her new book Malibu Rising actually comes out later this year, which I'm so excited for. I actually have an arc of it through NetGalley, and so I'm planning to read it in the next few months, and I'm so excited. I can't wait. Question number 7 is a popular book trope that you love reading about. One of my favourite tropes is found family. You know, where you have a group of characters that come together and form like a friendship group. Just in general, I like reading about friendship groups. I find it a much more interesting dynamic than, say, I was going to say instead of a romance, but that's a lie. I like reading romance too. Speaking of romance, I also really enjoy the hate to love trope. I like seeing two characters that initially maybe don't understand each other growing to appreciate each other and possibly fall in love. Again, it warms my cold dead heart. I think actually what I've realised is that I really love communication in books. I really love it when characters actually talk to each other and they have open conversations and then build a relationship off of that, whether it's a friendship relationship or an actual romantic relationship. That is what I love. Question number 8 is a popular series that you are excited to read. The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I need to read this book, and it is ridiculous that I haven't read it yet, because I've been saying for probably the best part of a year that I want to read it. I know that it's had a lot of hype on BookTube and a lot of people absolutely love it, and it feels like the kind of book that I would also enjoy. Also, just going to throw this out there, but this year is going to be the year that I finally read Mistborn, or at least the first book. I actually included The Poppy War and The Final Empire in my Try a Chapter challenge, like a video that I did recently, and I enjoyed the first chapter of both of these books, and so I know that I want to continue them at some point, but my TBR is ridiculous and I feel really stressed sometimes when I think of all of the books that I still need to read. So if I haven't read either of these books by the summer, then please shout at me, please make me read them, because I know that I'm going to enjoy them, but I think that the hype has scared me a little bit, and so I keep putting it off and I keep putting it off, but it will happen. This is me holding myself accountable. Question number 9 is a popular book and film where you love the story in both formats. I feel like this might be a really obvious answer, but I love both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you'll know that I reread both of these last year and really enjoyed them. I also absolutely loved the films, or maybe not so much The Hobbit, but I love the Lord of the Rings films. I grew up with them. Like, I used to go to see them at the cinema with my family every year around my birthday, and so I'll always have special memories attached to them. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is another one where I really enjoyed the book, and I really recommend the film, but the Swedish version rather than the American version. Like, there's nothing wrong with the American version, but I didn't think it was needed. Like, the Swedish one is really good. I also wanted to mention Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I really loved this book. It was one of my favourite books when I was a kid, and it's definitely my favourite classic, and I feel like the film is a really good adaptation. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the questions and the end of the video. So thanks for watching if you've made it this far. I'm not going to tag anyone in particular, but if you're watching this and you're a booktuber and you would like to answer these questions and do this tag, then please do consider this me officially tagging you. But yeah, if you agree with any of my answers to these questions, or if you disagree, then please let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.